Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The Seattle City Council has just wrapped up its budget process, patching up a deficit of more than $250 million. How'd they do it, and why did one council member vote against the final package? Plus, how has Seattle responded to the biggest power outage the city has seen in 2 decades? And what impact will a new member have on the City Council? I'm with Councilmember Bob Kettle and outgoing Councilmember Tanya Woo to answer these questions and the ones you're sending in too. Next on City Inside Out, Council Edition.
I do think it's fiscally responsible. For one, we have the deficit, and so we have to address the deficit, and we have to have that flexibility.
A lot of people who are in 12th and Jackson also are at 3rd Pike and Pine and Belltown. Same group of people who travel back and forth. We cannot tackle this whole issue by only tackling one area.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Hello once again, I'm Brian Callanan and welcome to City Inside Out Council Edition. This month I have with me Councilmember Tanya Woo, Seattle's Position 8 citywide council member. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We also have with us Councilmember Bob Kettle, who represents District 7 from downtown up to Magnolia. He's also the council's public safety chair. Good to see you as well.
Thank you for having me again. Appreciate it.
Let's do this thing. And Councilmember Woo, I want to talk about this because we're recording this at a time in late November after a bomb cyclone that knocked out power to more than 114,000 people in Seattle, the biggest outage for the city since the windstorm of 2006. You chair the committee that oversees Seattle City Light. I just wanted to talk about how SCL has been responding to this and what you want to tell people who might be bracing for more storm activity here in the late fall and winter.
Yes, Seattle City Light is an amazing group. They were preparing for this storm event and were right away able to deploy crews out. I was getting notifications all night on different areas that are experiencing power outages, and people can go to the website to find out when their power will be restored.
Okay.
And so I believe that crews are still working around the clock to get everybody back online.
Yeah, it's going to be something people need to be careful for, I know, in the months ahead. I just wanted to make sure I cover that because I know a lot of people have been leaning on city resources for that over the past several days here. But I did want to move on to the budget that you just approved along with the other council members a short while before the recording of this show. And one big issue was how the council modified the Jumpstart payroll tax, which was originally supposed to go towards priorities like affordable housing, environmental programs, community development. In this budget, the council changed the rules a bit so Jumpstart money can go towards any general fund priority for the city going forward. Now, in looking at this, Councilmember Strauss, the budget chair, said this move helps preserve as many city programs and jobs as possible in an uncertain economic time.
We all thought that today in 2024, as we're looking to 25 and 26, that we would be out of the downstream economic impacts from COVID-19. The fact of the matter is that we are not out of the storm. We are in the eye of the storm.
Then there was Councilmember Morales, who voted against the final budget based on her concerns about Jumpstart. She had another view. She said taking away the guidelines that were intended to focus Jumpstart on some major city priorities is not what fiscal responsibility looks like.
And it doesn't put any guardrails on how much general fund to be spent, nor does it make a commitment to allocate resources for the original things like affordable housing and community development and Green New Deal and economic revitalization, which we all know are very important.
Councilmember Kettle, talk to us about your vote to support this change to Jumpstart, and how do you answer critics who say this move is not fiscally responsible?
Well, I do think it's fiscally responsible. For one, we have the deficit, and so we have to address the deficit, and we have to have that flexibility. And what we need to do, and like what I've been doing on public safety, was to engage the executive to ensure that those priorities are being addressed. And then once done, then we can follow up as needed. And by the way, the Jumpstart still has those parameters in terms of the allocations, and that hasn't changed, except for we've added 2 more, the general fund and the reserve. Okay. The reserve is good governance. Okay. That is fiscally responsible. And for the general fund, everybody seems to think like it's just public safety. But no, the general fund is paying for those kinds of programs, whether it's an HSD, Human Services Department, and others, housing. So it's not one thing that we have to look at. And separately, too, we also have to look at the past 5 years. Things have changed, like the housing levy. That is huge. So we have to look at the whole thing comprehensively, not just one single tax, but everything in a comprehensive way.
Okay. And I guess just people who said we had these original guidelines here, and the city's not following them anymore. I think that was one of the critiques. How do you respond to that piece of it?
Well, we have to respond to the needs of the day. You know, we cannot be locked in fully, and they're still there. So, but we have to have that flexibility because things change. We're coming out of the pandemic. We're not where we were, when it was first enacted, and this is something that we've seen each year of its existence too, by the way.
That's true. The council has taken money from it. This rule change was something that was a little different. Councilmember Woo, let me come at this a different way with you. Another challenge, I should say, with relying on the Jumpstart tax so heavily is that it can be volatile. It comes from bigger businesses with local payrolls of over $8.5 million. Stock market's doing great, as it has over the past couple years. That means a lot of money comes in. It's actually more than what the council had anticipated with Jumpstart. But when things are on a downturn, this Jumpstart tax revenue would be lower. So what are your thoughts on relying on Jumpstart so heavily now and potentially into the future for Seattle's budget?
So I really want to stress that, we haven't done anything different than previous councils. Previous councils have always used Jumpstart to supplement the general fund. And I think, this is many of council members' first budget, and I think this is a whole learning process for everybody. And so I think going forward now, in the next couple of years, just really examining what we did and looking at how we could modify that for the future. And so I think while we did learn a lot, and many of us have only been in office for about 10 months, I think this will help inform our decisions for the future.
Okay. And in terms of new revenue that might be coming in, I know the council also said no to a capital gains tax that could have brought in $16 to $51 million per year. Why did you not support that? Could I talk to you about that, please?
Yeah, so I personally did support it, but my issue with that was that this was done during the budget process. I think this needs to go through the legislative process where we can have ample time for communication, information, outreach, and engagement, allow for that public comment period to be able to get fully informed about this. I mean, having it go through budget in such a quick process, even though this is currently a state model,
right.
I think we really need to look at it in a longer term. For the emails I got like 122 emails regarding this tax, and overwhelmingly, people did not support it, which is really interesting to me. I think to be really exact, 122 emails, 94 said no, 28 said yes. And so I think there needs to be more time for these discussions and to fight whatever miscommunications out there.
Okay. I know, too, on the flip side of this, I'll go to you on this, Councilmember Kettle, when it comes to legislative matters statewide, there was that measure there that talked about a capital gains tax going forward, and we should stop it at the state level. People overwhelmingly said, no, we want to keep a capital gains tax around. I know there was a lot of talk about timing. Is this the right time for a capital gains tax here at the city level? If you look at those statewide numbers, like, well, maybe it is the right time, but I know there was some concern about this, too. Talk to me about the capital gains tax and why you voted the way you did.
Sometimes it's not about what we're doing, it's about how we're doing it. One thing that came out of this experience for me is that doing things last second as part of the council budget action, amendments on amendments, that's seat of the pants decision making. We would be so much better off of having informed decisions based on great committee work. This is something that I was really doing on public safety. So I can speak to like CCTV because we worked that through. And that engagement through the committee process where you bring people in the brief, you have the give and take, you have council members doing amendments, engaging with SPD or other departments, that whole process informs. And a lot of the things that we were doing in this council budget piece, because things were coming in last second or from different angles, that didn't have that committee backdrop. And we were less for it, I think. I think we should, you can't escape it fully, but we should look to drive on, tenant service, tenant landlord, all these kinds of issues, we should look, including the taxes piece through the finance committee. We should be looking at these things and working them through committee because that gives better informed decisions and I would say good governance.
Got it. So maybe some more study is needed for something like this. Is the council open to the idea of more revenue, progressive revenue? I know that's a big decision or a discussion that happened this time, too.
Quite possibly, but at the same time, in terms of structural reform, we have to look at the base pieces, too, and how can we ensure that they're strong? That seems to be all this talk about progressive revenue, and I'm not saying take it off the table, but what I'm saying is don't lose the forest from the trees. And it's like, hey, we have these major building blocks, and why are they?
Sales tax, property tax, et cetera.
All the above. And, and this goes to having a strong downtown. The downtown is the engine for Seattle. Seattle is the engine of the region and for the state. Don't cut your nose and spite your face by focusing over here without focusing due attention. Yes, attend to that, but you have to deal with the basics as well. And it has to have that balanced approach. And that was one of the frustrations that came out of this process for me.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this just to wrap up with this big picture piece here, Councilmember Woo. In being fiscally responsible, I know the council went in thinking, all right, maybe there's a bunch of cuts to be had, but when it came down to it, it was about maybe $8 million that was cut out of an $8 billion budget. So 0.1% of that, did you want to cut more, or can you help me with that decision? Because some people were thinking maybe cuts would be greater and the council wanted that, but that's not exactly how it turned out.
Well, when we talk about cuts, it's more like how do we move money around? And I think the mayor tried to do that exercise where he asked all departments what it'll look like.
If you cut X percent.
Exactly. Yeah, and then he made a decision and passed down a balanced budget to us. And so we really examined this and really, for us, moved money around to make sure we fit our priorities. And so now that we've been through this budget process, I think, and have gotten a couple months under the belt, hopefully going forward, we are mindful and focusing the whole year on the next budget.
Got it. You had something.
I was going to say the committee piece too can look at these organizations because a lot of it's salary, but we also are contracting out. It's like who's doing the job and who's doing it well. If they're not doing it well, hey, but if you're not doing that review process, you know, that's a challenge. And by the way, look at the Seattle Housing and Investment Plan.
Okay.
Where we're looking to have OH work, and they've done a lot of this work, so this is not a negative OH, but we need to have OH go through the process like SDOT did with the Seattle Transportation Plan. We need to have it all out there in terms of the money's coming in, the different programs, and the different types of housing, and how we got our plan in a comprehensive way. So then people can say, hey, I understand that we're not doing this, but because we're doing this over here, and they can see the trade-offs. But if everything is just happening in isolation, next thing you know, you have citizen initiatives coming in, which is another angle.
Right.
It creates confusion. So the Seattle Housing Investment Plan could be a big thing that comes out of this budget process. So 5 years from now, let's have a discussion about it.
Okay. That's a little ways down the line. But did this budget process need more transparency? I know there was some concern about that too. Any thoughts about that moving forward? Could the process have been more transparent? What do you think?
I think the transparency concern was revolving around the last-minute amendments and walk-on amendments and not having it actually be online so that viewers and people can actually read and watch them. And so I think that's the concern with that piece. And so I think we could definitely do better in terms of making sure that these things get in early and on time and more collaboration. And I think part of it's also finding co-sponsors to make sure that they get to that level.
Yeah, important part of it. Any more thoughts on transparency?
Well, that's a very good point Councilmember Woo makes. In fact, Chair Strauss was saying, hey, done with amendments. I looked at him on the dais. I said, okay, I'm done. And so when it came up again, I said, no. And to be consistent and to be fair to the process and fair to the transparency point that you make, you know, the last second pieces of this really should be something to be avoided. You can't get away with it 100%, but a little bit too much.
Understood. I want to talk about some of the budget priorities you personally pushed for in this session. Councilmember Kettle, you had amendments talking about funding for police overtime, support for community-based public safety programs like We Deliver Care, hiring new city attorneys. Can you give us a brief look at your top priorities, maybe your overall approach to the two-year budget and what you were able to get through?
So my approach was based on my strategic approach generally, because budget should really reflect what you're looking to do. So obviously public safety is number one. And I was working through the departments in terms of we have to have a functioning criminal justice system. We have to have these attorneys, the prosecutor, the assistant city attorneys, the ACAs for the civil division. OEM is really important. Emergency preparedness. We're just talking about bomb cyclone.
There we go.
We have to build those things up. So public safety was huge. And on that point about this Seattle police overtime, that was highlighted, but what's not highlighted was a companion piece where 6.5 was taken out of the 2 years. So actually that was a net $3 million savings, but it was always presented as I was adding 10 million in. This is working together in a collaborative way with central staff, highlighting a mistake, if you will, and working it and fixing it. And in doing so, we actually gained $3 million as opposed to dumping $10 million, which is how it was portrayed in the media.
Okay.
And I just wanted to highlight that. Next is like I port economic pieces, and then also the district, but in a good governance way. It's like the Garden of Remembrance. We needed to do work on that. We shouldn't wait till the whole thing, the membrane with in the garage below it. We should take understand what's happening, because ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Getting the Mohai kicked off, and then also Portal Park. These are important pieces, but doing it in the smart right way, where we're looking to start the process early so you can make smart decisions.
Thank you. Councilmember Woo, I wanted to talk about some of your top priorities and summarize, if you can, briefly what you were able to push through there.
Yes, and so 12th and Jackson was a huge priority of mine. It's especially after the stabbings that happened a couple of weeks ago, and so really wanted to make sure that there was a constant response for that area. I know the mayor's office has reacted, restoration teams there to help with cleaning, emphasis patrols, which we're really thankful for in terms of how we look at downtown activation. But at the same time, I believe there needs to be that human aspect where we deliver care, lead in place, and possibly helping to bring back safety ambassadors in that area based on the work that Donnie Chin, our community protector, used to do. And so I wanted to make sure that that was included in the budget to make sure we are able to tackle and help people at 12th and Jackson, Third Pike and Pine, and all the areas that are affected. I mean, these communities are surviving. They're not thriving just yet, coming out of the pandemic and heading into FIFA World Soccer. Wanted to make sure that there's opportunity there. Also, I was really excited to help co-sponsor with Council President Nelson on mobile treatment vans for those areas to be able to dispense addiction medication when needed. And so I think we always look at Little Saigon and remember how it used to look 5 years ago. And I think we could definitely get back there. We just need a little more care and attention to that area.
Thank you. And I want to jump a little bit further into Chinatown ID. When it comes to public safety, so many of us have seen this police body cam footage. Sergeant Sullivan with the Seattle Police Department chasing down a suspect in the CID who randomly stabbed 10 people over a 2-day period in November. You mentioned that earlier. Not long after that, there was a shooting in the CID. A woman trying to help a friend close up business for the night was robbed, serious condition after the shots fired. I just wanted to focus on this a little more tightly if I could. What do you want to say to the Chinatown ID community about the violence that has been happening there and what the city is doing to help?
Yes, this is not the norm. This cannot and we will not accept it. And I think now that there is attention placed in the area, there are resources coming. The area has been under-resourced and marginalized for too long. And so I think now we're starting to make sure that attention is being placed, especially in 12th and Jackson, as looking at it holistically, because a lot of people who are in 12th and Jackson also are at Third Pike and Pine and Belltown. It's the same group of people who travel back and forth. We cannot tackle this whole issue by only tackling one area. We really need to look at all these different areas and try to help people, get people inside, but most of all, help the small businesses, families, also the residents. There is 4,000 people who live in the Chinatown-International District area, especially our elders, our seniors. And so how do we make sure we have the resources to tackle this and allow for this area to be able to thrive again?
Thank you. And Councilmember Kettle, I want to talk about this a little bit further, bouncing off what Councilmember Woo said. I know you've been working with the mayor on this downtown activation plan here, really trying to make sure that there's a team of people out there, downtown activation team, I know it's called, working with the Downtown Seattle Association, its mid-ambassadors, 15 departments from the city. Can you talk about this and how this is going to be different than emphasis patrols, et cetera, that the city has had in the past? How do you make sustainable change when it comes to public safety with this?
I think it's a great program. Obviously, I've been briefed in and understand it fully. Can I just say, too, that this work in Chinatown ID is going to continue as we move forward. And I'm going to do that as chair of the public safety, because obviously we're having a change on the council, but we're going to do that. I'm going to be working with my colleagues on the council to ensure that this area is taken care of, because there is this change. And by the way, I don't say Third Pike and Pine anymore. I say Third Downtown Belltown, because that's a misnomer, because the Belltown neighborhood needs it as well.
Sure.
And to your question regarding the DAT, to me, it's like a joint task force. And we need a joint task force commander to ensure that all the different elements of the departments of the city are working in unison and working towards that common goal, and to ensure that they're doing it. So I kind of call it, JTF, Operation Restoring Community.
Okay.
And so what they'll do is, link in, ensure that, because there's so many pieces, SPU, public utilities, SPD, fire. You have all these different pieces that come together, but they have to come together in a coherent, smart way. And this is where having the restoration director, as it's called, come in and to be that kind of joint task force commander, using my military background.
Yeah.
But it will be make it more effective and also give it the flexibility. This is the challenge that we had, like with the 3rd Avenue process, like We Deliver Care. You know, as we work areas, things move. And so then all of a sudden Chinatown ID was having problems, and then Belltown was having problems. So having that flexibility to, you know, to move between and adjust as conditions on the street change is going to be a big change, and it's going to be, I think, very effective.
Can I bring in the whole idea of providing surveillance cameras? Because I know the council talked about this last month, passed along a measure here that some people were very excited about. Some people, like the Office of Civil Rights at the city level, said, I don't know if this is going to work. Talk to me about surveillance cameras, because they're going into Chinatown as well as Aurora and 3rd Avenue, too. Is this going to help? How is this going to help?
Yes, talking to many of the businesses and residents in that area, they want it. And who am I to deny them that? And so I think they're desperate to try anything and to see if it'll help. And if you walk around that area, you'll see there are already cameras there. Many of the business owners spend thousands of dollars to place these cameras. And so I think having a unified camera system and seeing how it operates and how it will work will be helpful for that community and for the businesses and the residents in that area.
Councilmember Kettle, some thoughts on surveillance?
One is, as it grows to the budget, Councilmember Moore put in a plus up for CCTV. And so there's commentary about that. But you know what? That was backstopped by committee work with our CCT legislation.
Okay.
Where in there we talked about expansion of Aurora, and that had to be paid for. So there was a baseline for her budget action.
I see what you're saying.
Back to my earlier point.
Yeah, okay.
And the CCTV, it's based on data, you know, in terms of where it's going, in terms of, you know, working with the city attorneys and the police department. So it's for the hot spots. Here's a big thing, the real-time crime center. That's what's going to make the big difference. And on top of that, linking in the public-facing pieces of businesses. You've seen it with some businesses. They have the cameras in the front on the sidewalks in the street. Linking that in is going to be such a huge piece. So we can move quicker, better, faster to maybe address a crime in action, or to have better, quicker, better resolution. You know, in terms of identifying the person, arresting, and then you know, addressing that through the criminal justice system.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to something else here. I'm going to pick up the pace ever so slightly, if I can. Councilmember Kettle, I got an email in from a viewer, Robin, who wanted to know this. I heard on KUOW that Seattle's biggest public safety concern is traffic safety. That resonates for me. One of my kids was hit by a car walking to school. What can we do about this? Could we have some more red light cameras, speed cameras, other passive enforcement? Robin, thanks you very much. Thanks for the question. Some thoughts there, please.
Well, this is transportation levy. You know, we just had that passed, $1.55 billion. There's a lot of pieces to that, and that's a big focus, the Vision Zero, but also the safe routes to school. These are the kinds of things that I did in community in Queen Anne, much like Councilmember Woo did in her community, is trying to make things safer, to include the pedestrian and traffic safety. We did that a lot in terms of particularly around schools and areas where children would be. And so we just need to continue to do it. There's been a lot of work. There's still more work to be done. Okay,
thank you for that. Councilmember Woo, I got a very interesting one here from Eric. Had this idea, paying businesses to open their restrooms to the public. Hear me out. This is what Eric is asking. A business in a place where a restroom is needed could register their business with the city and appear on an online map the city maintains. Some places in the U District told me they would do this for $6,000 per year, or just $15 per day. Compare that to the $1 million public toilets being talked about that require special attendance and all the rest. I know some cities in Europe have this practice, but I wanted to throw this out there because I thought it was an interesting question from a viewer, incentivizing businesses to have restrooms open to the public. What do you think?
Oh my God, that is a great question. Well, I think it depends also on the area. In certain areas like 12 Jackson King, Lower 3rd and Belltown might be tough areas, especially. And so I think this is a decision that individual business owners will have to examine. I know for, as a business owner, you know, we take it by a case-by-case basis. But it's always a really interesting thing to handle too, because, you know, in certain areas where there are historic areas, the pipes are also historic, and so making sure that, you know, that we have the ability to be able to allow for that. And so I think that's something that we should definitely explore.
All right.
It's a great idea.
Thank you for letting me put you on the spot. And Councilmember Woo, I wanted to make sure we pointed out as we start wrapping up, we are recording the show just days before your term in office is set to end. You were appointed to this job in January, lost out on your election bid to Alexis Mercedes Rink here in November, and it's an odd situation for the position 8 seat. For a 4-year term, it's back on the ballot again next fall, along with the position 9 seat and a few other positions for the city. I want you, if you could, to reflect on your term and answer this viewer, please. ask Councilmember Woo if she's running again.
Oh my goodness.
Some thoughts out there. What do you have for us?
Oh no, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve in this role for the last 10 months and to be able to allow for the voice of many communities that I serve and are part of. And it's been an absolute honor to be able to serve amongst amazing colleagues. And it's been a very collaborative process, and we were able to get a lot done in the last couple of months, and to have shared values to be able to serve people. And, you know, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take some time to myself and just really examine what I want to do next. I think, you know, there's a lot of opportunities but most of all, you know, I started off as a grassroots advocate. That is where I want to go back to really fight. There's a lot of things that need to be done. I mean, we're expecting an increase in anti-Asian hate because of the national political climate. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I plan to keep on fighting.
Okay. It doesn't sound like you're going to be running again anytime soon. I want to make sure I covered that part with you. Is that true?
Oh, we'll see. I don't know.
Okay. That's generally the way it's done with these kind of questions.
Yes.
Councilmember Kettle, your thoughts on working with Councilmember Woo. You were one of the votes to appoint her to the council not too long ago.
It's been fantastic, and not just a vote. I nominated her, and as I said on the dais, the reason why is that because she has that experience of fighting for her community, and not just kind of like yeah, actually banging her head against City Hall's walls, you know, and that frustration, and the county too, by the way.
Yeah.
And you know that gains a certain perspective and a desire to work the issues, and that's what I loved about her positions and how she approached the job, and she's been a great partner in all the work that we've been doing this year. You know, we've got 11 public safety bills done this year. Some say, oh, we're not doing this or whatever. No, we've been major changes like in public safety and other areas too. A massive transportation levy, for example, and the transportation plan.
Yeah.
And she's been there with us working these issues, adding her voice. Can I just add too? When I sit there on the dais and I've been in Chinatown with her, and I see her with community, and she brings that perspective, like of the Asian community, which is nearly 20% of our city. And I see it also with Councilmember Hollingsworth. We were at an Urban League breakfast this morning. I've been in the CD with her.
Sure.
And she has that experience and that ability to connect and to represent. And that's going to be something that we're going to lose. But as I've told her, I'm definitely going to be looking out for Chinatown-International District, at least from the public safety perspective.
Sure.
And I really value that insight and that support that she gave to all of us, really, not just me, but all of the council members.
Can I ask you, just to wrap up here, Councilmember Kettle, what's it going to be like to work with a new council member in Alexis Mercedes Rink? Her politics are slightly different, I could argue, from the moderate majority that's on the council right now. What's that going to be like? What's that fit going to be like?
I think it will be fine. Obviously, we're all Democrats. It's always good to remind ourselves of that. I've spoken to her, and obviously she's going to be taking on the responsibility. Big arts and culture. That's big in District 7 and for our city. City Light, we're just talking about that. So she needs to engage on that. And then also the environment, sustainability,
right.
Tree canopy, all those issues. So I'm definitely going to be engaging with Alexis on these issues. I said as such to her directly. And so, you know, this is about being collaborative and working through and bringing the different pieces together to get a better end result.
Okay. Thank you both for your input. Thank you very much for your service to the city, Councilmember Woo. And we will see everybody next time on Council Edition.